Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War is one of the most read, most important works of classic literature. The Melian dialogue in particular is one of the touchstones of international relations theory, of realist political philosophy, and of the notion of justice or injustice in war. The dialogue took place during the conflict fought between Athens and its allies and Sparta and its allies. It was the greatest war fought between classical Greek city-states, lasting 27 years, from 431 to 404 BCE. Thucydides was an Athenian admiral who was relieved of command after losing a critical battle. He spent the rest of the war traveling and writing a history of the conflict. He sought to draw lessons from the war because he believed that war revealed important insights about humanity. War brought out both the best and the worst of people. Thucydides believed his book could become a timeless work of reflections on human nature, read from generation to generation for all time. And so far, for 2,500 years, he's been right. Melos is an island in the Aegean whose government had been neutral in the war. Melos had been founded as a Spartan colony 700 years earlier, but had not supported the Spartan cause. Athens had attacked Melos 10 years earlier, unsuccessfully, a small-scale attack, and demanded tribute, but the Melians refused to pay. But for the most part, Melos had stayed out of the conflict. In the middle of the war, there was a truce. Both Athens and Sparta were exhausted and facing internal disruptions and revolts. So they reached a temporary ceasefire so they could stabilize things on their home fronts. And during this truce, in 416, a large Athenian fleet showed up off of neutral Melos with the clear intention of conquest. The Melian leaders asked for private negotiations. The Athenians said, "The reason you want to have a private conversation is that everyone in your city can see what is about to happen. And if it were left up to them, they would just give us the island. But okay, we'll have it your way. We'll talk in private." However, the Athenians set down some conditions for the talks. The main one was that they wanted to dispense from the start with any question of right or wrong. To the Athenians, that would be a big waste of time. The Melians would make their claims for the justice of their cause. The Athenians would do likewise for their cause. They would go back and forth about who was right and who was wrong, and neither side would believe or be persuaded by the other. So just to speed things up, the Athenians made an offer to the Melians. Surrender and be absorbed into the Athenian Empire, essentially become dominated by Athens, or fight back and die. The Athenians said, "Since we vastly outnumber you, this is a very reasonable offer. At least we're giving you the option." And if Melos surrendered, it would save Athens the trouble of fighting. So it's a win for both. But the Melians didn't see it that way. And when the Melians objected to this offer, saying it was unjust and unfair, the Athenians justified their behavior by citing a timeless principle, something that has become the bedrock of realist international relations theory. It is, the strong do as they will, and the weak suffer as they must. That is the most basic realist argument, and to the Athenians, it was enough. The Melians naturally objected to this and tried to make some counter-arguments. For example, they said they had been neutral in the war, and they would stay neutral, and thus are no threat to Athens. So all this was unnecessary. The Athenians said, "Well, no, because if we go away now without conquering you, you won't stay neutral, plus we will appear weak, as though you scared us off." The Melians say, "Okay, but if we surrender, then we will look like cowards and lose face." The Athenians say, "Of course not. You would not look like cowards. You would be practical and sensible. There's no cowardice in avoiding a hopeless fight against overwhelming odds." Then the Melians say, if you attack a neutral island, all the other neutral states will band together and attack Athens out of self-defense. The Athenians say, actually, you have it backwards. The neutral states will join against us if we don't take you over. We are here to inspire fear in the neutrals that if they offend Athens, or even if they don't offend us, one day a fleet might show up just like this and take them over too. The Melians then say, you know, Athens might face some kind of payback for this, some karmic backlash of some kind. If you commit this evil act, someday, some way, something bad is going to happen. The Athenians say, well, that's our problem. Let us worry about that. But we are your problem. At this point, the Melians had exhausted their rational arguments, so they were left with two potential sources of salvation. One of them was Sparta. Maybe the Spartans would come to save them, perhaps based on their ancient ethnic ties, or maybe motivated by the injustice of it all. Perhaps Sparta could save the day. The Athenians said, well, you really shouldn't count on the Spartans. Sparta acts only in its own interest and has no interest here. Your ethnic ties are too remote. You don't trade with Sparta. You aren't an oligarchy like Sparta. You never made an alliance with Sparta. And basically, Sparta doesn't care about Milos. Besides, Sparta is busy with its internal disruptions, enforcing order on its subjects. Their forces are dispersed and preoccupied. And even if Sparta did care, and even if they were willing to break the truce just to come and save you, how could they do it? Sparta lacked the strong navy to intervene effectively or send a relief force. Athens was the dominant naval power at that time, so there was little Sparta could do militarily to lift a siege, even if they wanted to, which they don't. Because if Sparta had wanted Milos on its side, the Spartans would have made it known a long time ago. So the Athenians say, forget about Sparta. So what are we left with? The Melians make their final plea, an appeal to the gods. Somehow, the gods would intervene on their behalf. And in those days, making an appeal to the gods was essentially invoking the unknown, the unanticipated, the unpredictable. It was an appeal to the fortunes of war or luck. Maybe a storm would come and wreck the Athenian fleet. Maybe a plague would break out among the besieging force. Maybe there would be an earthquake, or something would happen elsewhere requiring the Athenian forces to leave like they did the last time. Divine intervention could take many forms. But the Athenians were not impressed. After all, look at the gods we're talking about. The Greek pantheon was not comprised of paragons of justice and virtue. These gods were driven by pride, by lust, by jealousy. They engaged in trickery. They played out their personal grudges in the human sphere. They punished innocent people seemingly for no reason. These gods wrote the rule book the Athenians were playing by. They set this game up. The Athenians say, how do you think we got our empire? By being false to the gods? By ignoring their example? By displeasing them? No, the gods love us. We're Athens. They reward the strong and awesome, not the pathetically weak like you. The Athenians say, we didn't invent all this. The world was like this before we existed. It's like this now, and it will be like this long after we're gone. And they said, face it, Melians, if you were strong and we were weak, you'd be doing the same thing we are doing now. Okay, we've set the scene. You're the decision makers. What should the Melians do? What are their options? Here's one option. Take the offer. Live as a vassal state to Athens. It would cost a lot in taxes and tribute. You'd probably have to contribute troops. You wouldn't be free anymore, but you'd be alive. Option 2, submit now, revolt later. The truth with Sparta can't hold forever. The war will break out again, and there may be opportunities to throw off Athenian rule. How long can the subjugation last, really? Swallow your pride for now and get payback when you can. Option 3, fight. Stand up for freedom and the cause you believe in. Make it like Thermopylae, or later in the American experience, the Alamo. If Athens is going to take this island, make them pay a price. Live on as an inspiration to free peoples for all time. And anyway, the Athenian attack earlier in the war failed, so who knows? Maybe it's possible to win. Well, in the end, the Melians fought, and they held out for a while. They even mounted some successful counterattacks. The Athenians were surprised at the tenacity of the Melian defense. So Athens sent in reinforcements to settle things, and Melos was overwhelmed. The men were killed, the women and children enslaved. Melos was resettled by 500 Athenian colonists. So what do we take from this tragic story? Some say in the Melian dialogue, Thucydides is showing Athens at its worst. At the start of the war, Athens was portrayed as virtuous, the Athens of Pericles, of art, of literature, of philosophy, and public works. But all their virtues had been swept away in the pursuit of power. Some also see the payback the Melians warned about coming in the next part of the book, when Athens launches a disastrous invasion of another island, Sicily. Its massive expeditionary force is wiped out, and Sparta, sensing weakness, rekindles the war. Melos is liberated in 405, and some survivors were brought back. Melos joins the Spartan alliance, and ultimately Athens did lose the conflict, after Sparta made an unexpected alliance with the hated Persians and defeated the Athenians at sea. But instead of a punitive peace, instead of treating Athens the way the Athenians treated the Melians, Sparta understood that Athens was too important for the defense of Greece to be annihilated. So the Spartans demand Athens tear down its walls, install an oligarchic government, and Sparta takes control of the Athenian Empire. The gods no longer favored Athens. They had new champions. The Melian dialogue has been studied for centuries and is one of the most important sections of Thucydides' history. It is an example of where the pursuit of power held sway over any kind of moral concern, any principled behavior, or any notion of just war. The strong do as they will, the weak suffer as they must. The question for you is, to what extent does this reflect contemporary international behavior? Or have we erected an international system that better imposes the limitations and restrictions of the just war tradition? One look at the war in Ukraine will show you that some countries still behave in the same old way, and some still fight back.